Okay. Okay, everybody, welcome to our March monthly meeting. For those of you who may not know, this is my first time running this meeting, so bear with me if I stumble a little bit. As usual, I think the format we have is the speaker will speak first, and then we'll handle any of the more serious Q&A after that, and then we'll have a short period for chapter announcements or comments. So tonight we have a special guest, Woody Hastings, is from the Climate Center, who will discuss state level legislation and policy with us. Normally, most of us are kind of focused on local issues and regional issues. We tend to be more familiar with, I guess, our local city governments and some of the local government organizations and groups, and don't have that much exposure or visibility to what's going on in Sacramento. So it's great to have Woody here with us tonight to give us some insight to that. Woody's on staff at the Climate Center. For those of you who are not familiar with the Climate Center, it's a nonprofit based in Santa Rosa that's focused on statewide policies and legislation for over a couple decades. I see, looking over their website. They draft legislation and do a bunch of work in different areas on climate-related, environmental-related issues, coordinating between different sectors, including local governments and business sector and EJ and environmental groups. I think for myself, I can say we got vital support from the Climate Center in the early days when we were lobbying for the formation of San Jose Clean Energy. And we appreciated that support very much. Woody's an energy and environmental analyst and planner and organizer with the Climate Center. He's been working for over 3 decades in this area and has been with the Climate Center since 2010. He has been instrumental in the formation of the CCA's Sonoma Clean Power, which most people know about, and other CCAs, and apparently I think recently Woody's been more involved with some CCAs around in the San Joaquin Valley. So with that, I'll hand it over to Woody. And Woody, we can't hear you.
Oh, that's because I was still on mute.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much for that introduction, and thanks everybody for having me. And I will share my screen so that we can get the slides up. So can folks see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Very good. So, I think you did, Glenn, a good introduction of the Climate Center, so I don't need to dwell too much on this one. That's a photo of some of the staff and board of the Climate Center. It's a growing team. I guess one thing I will just mention is that we did start out for many years, first 10 plus years, really working locally here in Sonoma County. I'm based in Sonoma County in Sebastopol. And working on those local initiatives and things you were just mentioning, and it was it's hard to say that we're still based in Santa Rosa anymore, because at the beginning of the pandemic we gave up our office, and that was right around the time we were really blossoming into a statewide organization. And we now have staff in Central Valley, Sacramento, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and so all over the state really. And so no real home office anymore. But yes, we're working on state policy now, almost exclusively. We are still working to try to get community choice up and running in Fresno, in particular, city of Fresno. So let's get to this. All right. So what first thing I want to talk about tonight is our flagship campaign, Climate Safe California, launched about 3 years ago, which is a campaign to have California by 2030 have the policies in place so that California is doing its part to be doing what's needed to be in alignment with the latest climate science. And what that actually means is that the state of California needs to get to net negative emissions, meaning that we have to draw down as much as we can, and we think that's about 80% below 1990 levels by 2030. It's really what we need to do. And then since those emissions alone won't do it, we need to sequester a significant amount of carbon dioxide. And we look to natural and working land sequestration for that. Um, and we have been successful in getting some legislation passed that for the first time ever sets some goals for natural and working land sequestration. That little image on the right there evokes that, the little sheep in the field there. In this presentation, there are sometimes over a dozen slides that talk about the problem. I think this group tonight, you're very familiar. You don't need to hear the laundry list of devastation that's going on around the world. It's a function of connecting the dots, right? It's happening everywhere in the coral reefs, in the Antarctic ice sheets, in the rainforests, um, you know, all around the world, Greenland. We're seeing extreme weather events. We're experiencing them right here in Sonoma County, where I live. I know folks all around the state are experiencing the bomb cyclones and atmospheric rivers now, and it's whiplash because we've just been, experiencing drought and extreme heat episodes in the warmer months. So it's becoming ever more clear, and of course the UN Secretary General characterizing it as code red, really a code red decade, that we need to make the changes in this decade to try to have a livable planet. So just this one slide on sort of that severity of the problem. So the Climate Center works in accord with several guiding principles following the latest climate science, as I mentioned. It's also about securing a truly just transition for the workers in the older economy, the fossil fuel economy, for their families and for the communities they live in that have become dependent in many cases on oil and gas extraction or refining or some other aspect of the oil and gas industry. We don't want those people to be left in the lurch. We want them to land on their feet. We want them to have opportunities in the new clean energy economy. So that's an important part of sort of the policies and the legislation, things that we advocate. We try to find these that really line up the latest climate science, securing a just transition, and the third one, prioritizing climate justice, which means that the vulnerable communities, the historically underserved communities, communities of color, are not only are no longer experiencing the burdens of the fossil fuel era, but that they are have access to the good climate solutions, and that the climate solutions themselves are not imposing further burdens on those communities. So those are some guiding principles. The 4 pillars, these are sort of programmatic pillars. The first one there on the left, phase out fossil fuels. That's my issue area, what I'm working on these days. And I guess I didn't mention that my particular program has been for a long time community choice energy and related things. And over the past few years, it's evolved into more around phasing out fossil fuels on the oil and gas extraction side, refining, and on the demand side, looking for clean transportation alternatives, building electrification, so those kinds of issues. So I had already mentioned that a big programmatic policy effort for us is scaling up natural carbon removal. We've made sort of a policy choice to not advocate for mechanical or engineered carbon capture and sequestration, but to look to natural and working lands carbon dioxide sequestration. Investing in resilience. This is where we look for policies where not only does it mitigate the climate crisis, maybe reducing emissions or sequestering, but also building in resilience, where you can, for example, have a clean microgrid that's serving a community that, on any given day when the sky is blue, but if there's some kind of grid disruption or other calamity, it could serve, it could be islandable and have the power stay on, and medications can stay cool, and people can stay cool if it's a heat wave or things like that. So resilience, adaptation is an investment we think is important. And then also really pushing to amp up the funding of climate, both in the state budget and in the sort of all the sectors that we work in to identify funding sources for climate action. And we often hear or maybe assume or think that California is really out front, and I think on a lot of things California is, in the climate space, but not on all, and not on some really big things like the goals themselves, like what the state is pressing itself to do. And so, for example, the European Union has more advanced, ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets than we do. Denmark, Rhode Island has greater greenhouse gas free electricity goals that California does. So we want to reestablish California as a true leader that has the right goals, but is also putting the policies and mechanisms and financing in place to achieve the goals. We do know that the reality is that we're not even on track to meet the current goals, but we can't just sit back and say, well, okay, we're just going to work on meeting bad goals. We need to have the right goals and the right policies to get there. So that all was really sort of the topic of Climate Safe California. And what I like to do in my presentations is have a little bit about, well, what can people do? And maybe a lot of you have already done this, but we do ask for folks to endorse the Climate Safe California program. That's the URL there for Climate Safe California. And it's got a whole bunch of underpinning documentation for pathways to how to achieve some of the things that we're calling for. Over 1,800 businesses and individuals and elected officials and organizations have endorsed. And so if you haven't done that yet, that would be great. And we do use this as sort of a tool to express to legislators and other policy leaders, the magnitude of the support for setting ambitious goals and policies that achieve those goals. Now, getting to some of those policies, what are we specifically working on to achieve, to fulfill, the Climate Safe California push? And SB 12, Senate Bill 12 is our current sponsored bill. It's authored by Senator Henry Stern from down south, spot where I used to live, down in the Santa Monica Mountains. It is sponsored by the Climate Center, and so this is one we're investing a lot of time and energy and resources into, and this bill does not do everything we would like it to do, but it is worth supporting because it is looks to accelerate the goals to at least 55% below the 1990 level by 2030. Currently, it's at 40%. So this would be improvement. We're working with the author and others to see how we can, see if it's possible to push that up even further. We'll see. It was approved in the Environmental Quality Committee just recently on March 15th. And this is one where you can send letters of support, send them to the author, send them to the committee members where they go to committee. The next place where it will be heard in a committee where those letters or the positions are noted will be when it gets to the assembly side. It's already going to go to the Appropriations Committee probably sometime in early May. And then it'll go off to the assembly side. And that's where it'll go to, in all likelihood, a Environmental Quality Committee, their similar committee, and that's where you can weigh in, you can speak, you can write a letter to the committee chair. So that's SB 12. And then our other bill, we're sponsoring two bills this year. It's a lot to manage even just one bill, but so we've got two. And this one is an interesting bill all around. It really speaks to the capacity, the energy capacity that exists in all these electric vehicles we're putting on the road. And so what it would require is that by 2027, uh, not all, I think I still have all EVs. So that's not true. Most EVs in California, it doesn't, there are some cases where it doesn't really work, but most EVs sold in the state of California to have the capacity to be bidirectional by 2027, and that the electric vehicle charging infrastructure also have that ability. Why? So that the batteries can be used not just to charge up and run the vehicle, but when the vehicle isn't running, to be able to charge the grid for reliability purposes, grid management, and for resiliency in the case of emergencies, if that energy is needed. And school buses are a great example because they're not used in the evening, right when that evening ramp kicks in and the sun's going down and people are coming home and plugging things in, and there's a need for electricity. And so school buses are a really interesting case for that. And so we're
Uh,
looking at that. And oh,
what do you,
yeah, go ahead.
just a quick point on clarification. So is this attempting to set a deadline for vehicle to grid readiness?
Uh,
Regulatory, on the regulatory side also?
it is for yes,
Or just
at
for the
least
vehicles need to be bidirectional?
I would say at least in part. Well, it's also the EV service equipment, electric vehicle charging equipment also, must
Okay,
be able to accommodate bidirectionality. So it's at least that part of it, and I know there are some other regulatory pieces of it. And so this is a push to ensure that at least the vehicles, the main thing is the vehicles, because we're getting uh, more and more on the road all the time, and the estimate is that there's something on the order of 80 gigawatts of capacity that will be on the road by 2030. That's like 20, 30 gigawatts beyond California peak demand. So this is a significant amount of
yeah,
latent capacity that we need to be able to tap, right?
yes.
So making sure that we're not getting to 2030 and looking back and going, gee, if I only could have had a V8. Anyway, so sorry for this. I think most of us know what that was from. But anyway, so yeah, when this gets to committee, this will be one to support in committee or write a letter and that kind of thing. It's not scheduled right now. It's not scheduled even in the Senate yet. We're hoping to have that uh, date sometime very soon. And this is where you would be able to keep track of that. This is our new this year bill tracker. And I think some of you are already aware of it and maybe using it. And
Yes.
I do a lot of the underpinning entries and put the information in it. And so we're still working bugs out and still improving it. And so happy to have any feedback from folks. And I gotta say, I don't know if this is a record year for bill introductions, but it's one of the biggest in a very long time, with I think something close to 3,000 bills being introduced. And just check it out, just in climate and clean energy and transportation alone, there are over 200 bills. We are tracking, either in our background tracker or on this public facing bill tracker, around a little over 200 bills. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a lot. But this is where you can just put in a word, like if it's, electric vehicle or the name of the author or any topic area, you can put it in the tracker and it'll pull up bills that have that keyword or bill number or bill author in there. So now we're sort of venturing off into some other things. Bring folks' attention to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. If you haven't heard about this, this is something that is it originated with the island nations in the Pacific, Vanuatu, and Tuvalu, Kiribati, some of these island nations that are really facing existential threat from sea level rise, and their whole livelihoods, their whole they may need to move off their island. Anyway, this came from them. It originated with the island nations. They've called for a fossil fuel treaty. This, fossil fuels, oil and gas, that's not something that's negotiated at the UN uh, climate talks. It's really about binding agreements on greenhouse gas emissions, how the countries come about that. That's never discussed. So they never really specifically talk about the root problem, which is, the burning of oil and gas and coal. So this is an endorsement of a call for an international treaty modeled along the lines of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but in this case around fossil fuels. So looking to have nations agree to actually phase out oil and gas exploration, drilling, processing, refining, all of that stuff. And you see there the cities in the U.S. that have endorsed. There's Sebastopol on there, so I had a little bit to do with that. Okay, folks have heard about the Inflation Reduction Act, and this is just a slide to draw your attention if you're not already aware of this really great place where it's collects a lot of the information about the tax credits and rebates that are available, Rewiring America. So the tax credits and incentives are already available. There's going to be more incentives and things coming through. The California Energy Commission is going to be working on, or is working on, setting up the programs to channel those federal dollars to the folks that can use those monies to improve our energy situation at each of our homes. And I folks here know about Silicon Valley Clean Energy and San Jose Clean Energy, of course. I put Silicon Valley Clean Energy in here instead of the CCAs, San Jose and Silicon Valley. Stay engaged, be involved with them. We were involved with Sonoma Clean Power Launch and many other CCAs, as you know. So you can attend their meetings. They're open to the public. If they don't have one, you can push for the formation of a community advisory committee, that kind of thing. And then just a note about consumption, which, to do this right, all through the 20th century, there was really a sort of a rubric of the supply meet the demand, whatever the demand might be. And I think we really need to rethink that and look at how can we actually build enough renewable energy to meet necessary demand, meet basic human needs. So it's really about, supporting candidates who understand that we need to reduce consumption and start to scale back some of the luxuries and things. I just have this little image here that gives an idea of what I'm talking about. Some of these things, it might be fun, but I don't know, are they really needed? So I think it's a function of questioning everything in our lives. Personally, how we, what we want to adopt and approach if we're going to sort of make the transition work. I think that's what I had. I'm happy to take any questions folks might have. And of course, there's tons more, but I just wanted to not go on forever. That's my contact information. And yeah, so stop sharing. Questions?
Can I start the questions? I have one. First of all, hello, Woody. We haven't ever met, but it's great to see you tonight. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm also into the bill tracking game, and after last year was my 4th year of doing it for 350 Silicon Valley, which is now Climate Action California. And although I'm shifting over to landfill and methane, I'm frantically working with Woody's partner, volunteer Chris Thomas from the Climate Center, to write Climate Action Now actions that any of you can take easily on your phone to send a pre-written, pre-addressed constituent letter. They're concise on 20. We got 20 of them under our belt so far. We'll probably ultimately have about 30 after Chris gets back from vacation. We're divvying up the list. And so I was wondering if it's okay if I just put what we have so far into the chat. And those of you who are on Climate Action Now or want to get on it, and maybe send, say, 2 of these out per day to your state senator and your assembly member and the governor. And they're on the exact bills that Woody was presenting tonight, plus the rest of the list, or at least the top 20 or so far. Is that okay if I do that? Put it in the chat.
If you're asking me, I'm fine with that. And I'll also drop the bill tracker into the.
Right on. That thing's
although
great.
Seems like a lot of people are aware of it, but
It's really nice. Thank
so
you for
did
it.
you have a question, Bill?
No, I was asking permission to
Sure.
amplify your bill tracking results for folks to go take the constituent letter actions,
Right on. Thank you. Yeah, no,
asking permission.
appreciate that. That's fine. Yes, absolutely.
So we'll see how this goes. I might have to put these in. Oh, I see. Okay, so it's a little funny to parse. But let's just see how it goes.
And I know why Ruth has her hand up, because I forgot to mention something.
I actually, Woody, I have, oops.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Well, Chris wrote half of them and I wrote half of them. So for example, on we haven't written SB 233 on the EV bidirectionality, but for example, in the middle, there's support SB 485 to reduce cattle methane emissions. So that lays the groundwork for the early stages of the requirements that SB 1383 put in place before we can go forward with subsequent actions. So anyway, so that's a little turgid, but maybe if you save the chat and do about 2 of these a day on your phone, your legislators are going to get to be your best friends. Sorry, Woody.
Let's
talk later. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
And hold on. And actually, Woody, I have 2 other questions. I'll ask the other questions first.
Should I talk about SB 538 first, though?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, because several people asked about that. And so I did mean to mention when I was talking about the bills, AB 538 by Assembly Member Chris Holden. So this is a re-emergence of basically the same bill that he introduced in 2018 that ultimately failed, AB 813, that some of you may recall if you were around and doing stuff back then. And what this is all about, it's an effort to change the way electricity is, and it's really bulk electricity, meaning the big utility scale management of the electricity grid under the California Independent System Operator, CAISO, changing how that all has worked roughly since the 2000-2001 energy disaster with the whole Enron disaster. There were some changes and safeguards put in place, and we've been operating under that sort of construct ever since then. 20 plus years. So this would basically restructure CAISO to become a Western regional transactional system for electricity, mostly in the sort of transmission world, the big metal things that traipse across the countryside, transmission lines. And how energy is traded, sold, purchased, that kind of thing, and how that's managed. And it would take away California's sort of energy sovereignty. It would turn it into what's called a regional transmission organization that no longer is dedicated to serve California public interest, but is made up of representational members from states that in some cases use a lot of coal, such as Wyoming, Utah, in the Western US, Arizona, that would be sort of members of this entity, and it would be under FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission jurisdiction, which has proven several times over to not necessarily be in line with what California's goals and policies have been with regard to advancing renewables. And so, and certainly those states are not either. So it really, in my view, the Climate Center has not taken a position on this bill. I should say we don't have a position yet. We do have a time scheduled to discuss it among our policy team. I'm going to be pushing that we oppose it. I think that it's a very risky bill for California for the state. Risky because there's no turning back. If we do this, we can't decide, oh, this isn't working out, let's go back to the way it was. Can't. That's been proven in courts with previous examples of states going into regional transmission organizations and wanting to back out, and that being told by FERC and by the courts, no, you've entered into this agreement and there's no going back. So that's highly problematic. And, it's the electricity sector where we've really made the most gains in terms of the climate action and the reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, the solar, the wind, the geothermal, the small hydro, all of the progress. A lot of the progress we've made in the state is in the electricity sector, and I really don't think it's makes sense to gamble it. So that's my personal opinion about it. I've been researching it a lot, been reading a lot. I was in it back in 2018, and it's all deja vu all over again, right? Because it's a very, very similar thing. And so really reviewing a lot of the stuff from back then and sort of looking at the context now, a lot of the same threats remain, a lot of the same, downsides remain, and the upsides they say are, oh, it's going to save some money, it's going to make it easier, it's going to make the grid more reliable. None of those things are guarantees, first of all. And second of all, the magnitude of those cost savings or the degree to which reliability is enhanced, it's really, in my view, it's not worth the risk involved. And there's really I don't think that there's any valid case that it's going to help us boost our renewables. And I see other hands up, so I did want to touch on that because I was asked to. But why don't we go to, first on my screen is Adam, so why don't you go, Adam?
I think Ruth had an actual, or not.
Oh,
yeah,
Ruth. Oh, that's right, Ruth. You put your hand down. You had two other questions. Yeah, why don't we let Ruth ask her other questions?
They're actually pretty quick. Do you have sample letters for SB 12 and SB 233?
We do have one for SB 12, and we don't have it ready yet for SB 233, but I can send you the SB 12 one, and just let me make a note of that. I'll follow up and do that.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question is, the IRS was supposed to come up with regulations on EVs for the IRA in March, and it's March 27th. Do you know if anything's happened on that yet?
I don't.
Okay.
I
was just curious if you knew.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything either, and I've been following it. So, okay, thank you. Go ahead, Adam.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you.
I had a question if I could jump in.
Well, actually, we've got 3 people with their hands up, and I'll just put you on the stack, Ken. So
Okay,
after Adam, Elaine, and Karen, I'll get to you, okay?
That works.
Go ahead, Adam.
Sure. So in the beginning, you mentioned that your focus is on sort of phasing out fossil fuels. I guess I had kind of 2 things I was interested in. One, what do you think about what's going on with SB 1137, the one that's going on the ballot? That was well, you probably know it by number, but the one that creates space between new oil wells and.
Yeah, sure. You're right. It's 1137.
Okay. And I'm kind of curious what you think about what the next steps are in the fight there and how we might help. And 2, you mentioned like just transition stuff for people who work in the oil industry in California. That seems like such a difficult problem, and I'm curious what you've been trying to do there and what you see that might actually be effective.
Thank you. Yeah, so on 1137, for folks that don't know, this was a bill that was actually passed. It was championed by the governor last year. and it requires, it imposes a 3,200-foot setback for any wells, oil and gas extraction wells and sensitive receptors like schools and residents and things like that. And so, and would it affect existing wells, so they would need to close down. Um, and, uh, and, and the oil industry filed a referendum, and in mid-February qualified for the 2024 ballot, a referendum to overturn that law. So it's on hold, um, meaning that it would be implemented this year, but it's on hold pending the result of that 2024 ballot initiative. And so right now, there are organizations like Vision and Last Chance Alliance. There are coalitions that are working on that. They have a campaign just kicking off in the next few weeks called the Big Oil Resistance Tour, something like that. Yeah, Big Oil Resistance Tour. And so you'll probably see some stuff in the news about that. And this is really all about pushing back against what the oil industry is trying to do to overturn this common sense law. So, I mean, I think maybe, getting plugged into some of those organizations, that I can send some contact information or links about that if folks want. And the other question was, could you remind me what the other one was?
Just asking about
Oh,
how.
just
we-
transition, just transition. So we are working on building our relationships with labor entities, labor organizations. We are, we work with Labor Network for Sustainability and the Blue Green Alliance, and with organized labor. We've hired 2 people. Mark Victoria is our statewide organizer who has a deep background in labor, a lot with the AFSCME organization, and recently Rob England, who's based in Bakersfield, who has a deep background in labor as well. A lot of his work with the Communications Workers of America and SEIU. So we're working sort of to internally build our sort of chops on labor relations and build our relationships with labor organizations. And we try our best to sort of listen, understand. We're working with some folks in the Central Coast on some labor standards for community choice agencies, principles for them to look at as they contract for projects and other procurements. So it's those kinds of things that we're working on. And yeah, I hope that helped a bit. Elaine?
Hi, Woody. Thanks for the presentation and the useful links, and thanks for the Climate Center. I just had a question about one of the pillars. Is that scale up natural carbon removal, and you specifically focused on natural as opposed to engineered methods. And I've heard that from more than one place, and I'm curious, is that simply because the engineered methods aren't ready to be scaled up yet, or is there more to it?
It's not just that they're not ready to be scaled up yet. I think that there is the cost. I think that the overarching concern is that that approach is an approach that can have an unintended consequence, at least unintended from our perspective, which is that it can serve to prolong the fossil fuel era, prolong the use of fossil fuels, prolong the burdens to frontline communities that have been burdened for decades by these operations. So if you say, oh well, hey, let's not worry about closing down that refinery because we can put some carbon capture and storage on it and just keep refining all the way to 2100. That's the real concern, right?
So it's like it's not against the concept itself. So if people aren't using it, if it's not being used to continue fossil fuel emissions or use of fossil fuels, there's there's nothing wrong with it other than that, I guess. Is that,
I mean, there are
I mean, if we have people working on it, eventually that is going to get scalable. Should we use it at that point?
Yeah, I
Assuming
mean,
that,
and I think
yeah,
the
okay.
arguments around cost and that it's the trial, the projects haven't worked out as I don't think those are good arguments, because all kinds of technologies start out with hiccups and bumps in the road, and then eventually they figure it out. So, I, the fact that it hasn't really worked out well yet, I don't think is the deal breaker. And there are cases like, carbon capture, mechanical carbon capture for process emissions from cement manufacture, for example. There's absolutely no reason why that is a problem, other than you could say, well, let's figure out other ways to, let's figure out alternative to cement.
Right.
And so there's some other, industries where carbon capture may make sense, but where it's clearly something that's going to prolong
Right.
fossil fuel industry, that's where we have a problem. So
Thanks. Makes sense.
and tangential to your or sort of on the other side to your question, where is the work on the natural sequestration? So last year in the climate bill package that was passed at the tail end of the session, AB 1757, which was modeled on the bill that we sponsored at the beginning of the year, AB 2649. Sorry for all the numbers. But anyway, AB 1757 is the first ever bill to look to set some targets for the state of California on its working lands in particular. So the farms and the ranches and the agricultural operations, instead of being carbon emitters, how can they be carbon sinks? So that's what that's all about. I dropped a link to it in the chat. I think, Karen, are you next?
Yeah, thanks, Woody. It's so great to have you here. I am very worried about the, conversion to a regional agency for transmission. And I was wondering if we could go back to that just for a moment, and you could share a little more detail about the background of that, like who's not only supporting it, but who created that? What was the genesis of that bill? And what is what's the general legislative opinion about that, the legislators in California? And then with all that background in mind, knowing who's actually supporting this, what is the best way that we can try to stop that bill?
Right. Yeah, I mean, so my read on it, and I have been reading a lot about sort of the history over the last 23 years or so of what's been going on. And I've interviewed several people who have been there all along the way, who were there in the 1990s when the push for deregulation came about. My read on it, I'll just cut straight to the chase. It's being pushed largely behind the scenes. It's trying to claw back the ability to play in the California energy market. That's what's going on. After the 2001 Enron debacle, some safeguards were put in place that really sort of forecloses on the kind of shenanigans that happened then, the energy trading, that happened. There's actually a specific sponsor. It's an entity called Advanced Energy United is the sponsor. It's a Washington, D.C. based organization. I don't know much about them, but I know that they are sort of the sponsor. And I think that there are, there are, we know we already have the Western energy imbalance market since 2014. And that is, we already trade, because they'll say, oh, we need to be able to move electricity around the Western states, not just within California. Well, we already do that. We're wheeling in power from outside of California all the time, and we export power all the time. And it's called the Western energy imbalance market. And it has proven to be something that's helpful and beneficial. And so we're not saying get rid of that. California operates within that context with energy sovereignty, with CAISO as it is. If it ain't broke, don't fix it is one of the things I think you could say. And if it ain't broke, that doesn't mean you can't work on improving it. So I think there are some things you could do to improve the current Western energy imbalance market. And but that, so I don't know if that helps to answer the question, but you know, the author of the bill, I'll just say one more thing, which is that the author of the bill is you know, a member that we've known for a long time to really be sort of a utility biased member, and the utilities and folks that in that sector are supportive of this. So you know, I think that that's largely where it's coming from. I hope that helped answer it. Glenn, did you have a question? Oh, go ahead.
Before, just real quick then, does that suggest that if you're saying the IOUs are supporting it, that includes PG&E?
They ultimately supported it. It went back and forth back in AB 813. You know, it's still early. I haven't seen, there hasn't been a bill analysis yet, so it's not clear who's support and oppose yet. Like I said, Climate Center, we're meeting on it soon to hopefully come to a opposed position. You know, we might just stay off it. I don't know if we can all come to an agreement. I don't know where the IOUs are on it right now. I think the point about the bill author is that, you know, he's someone who's tended to be more in favor of some of these big solutions, whether they're real solutions or not, rather than the kind of thing that we have been pushing for. I think, you know, knowing what I know of your group, is that it's really about the distributed energy resources, and, you know, solar in the built environment, and, you know, advancing storage and electric vehicles. It's not really about, oh, how can we do huge, you know, mega projects and utility scale everything and big energy trading. And I think that's the kind of thing that Assemblymember Holden has been biased toward.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. That helps a lot, Woody. Thank you.
Glenn?
Yeah, thanks for those comments on the regionalization. Yeah, we were anxious to get your feedback on that. Second, I have a separate question. Can you, sorry, I got dropped off. My house internet died there, so I missed 5 minutes or so. Did you happen to touch on SB 253, the
That's the climate.
the reporting, SEC-like reporting, financial reporting, and climate reporting measure? Yeah. And if you didn't, can you have any comments on that?
So that would be.
You know, the Securities and Exchange Commission has been.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up, and maybe I should actually do this. I could do this on my screen, but let's just pull it up here. 253, because it'll jog my memory when I see it on the screen here. So yeah, this is Scott Wiener bill SB 253. It's
Right.
really all around requiring large corporations in the state that do business in excess of $1 billion a year, that they disclose, that they report on their greenhouse gas emissions. So just drop that, at least drop that into the chat. So it's all about their own emissions, and there's several bills actually this session that relate to large corporations and their their relationship to climate financial risk. This one is about reporting on data about their greenhouse gas emissions. Was there a specific thing you wanted me to touch on about it? I think it's one that I think we're already supporting it. What are we doing here? Yeah, we're supporting this bill. So some of the bills we have had a chance to talk about, and we've come to a support position on this one. It's about information, right? So.
Well, yes, it's about information, and yes, and transparency, and emissions and supply chain related. In particular, I think that we all sort of, I think, appreciate that the supply chain will be the painful part to try to quantify. So this, you know, at the federal level, the SEC has been working on something like this for quite some time. And that sounds great to have it at federal level. But so the question is the California measure reasonably well constructed? Will it be redundant? Any reason not to support it? We noticed the text, all three of us that have looked at it noticed the text is very simple. It doesn't have a lot of meat there. Maybe they're offloading that
The
to
early part of the session, they usually, they are, I mean, the most minimal bills are what's called spot bills, and there's virtually nothing there. They might change a comma. This one, I think, last time I looked at it, it didn't have, you're right, it didn't have much there. Typically, once they get to committee, they start to amend in more substance. So this one is, so this was approved March 15th. Onto the Judiciary Committee. Yeah, I would need to look into a little bit to see if they've added anything to it.
okay. Okay, thank you.
I mean, we looked at it when it came out, and we felt that it merited support. And it's sometimes we support in concept,
Mhm.
and the concept is good. Devil can sometimes be in the details. We didn't see any red flags that made us want to not support this bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
Hi, I'm also a member of Citizens Climate Lobby. We're trying to press for a carbon price nationally, and now we're working on the state. One of your goals is to accelerate the transition. Where do you see a carbon price? And do you think it's time for a climate emergency declaration? I mean, there's all of these disparate bills. You know, you said 200 are in the works. It just seems like so many people are putting so much time and energy with not a grand master plan. Maybe a climate emergency, the time is now. I mean, tipping points, right? We have this huge snowpack in the Sierra Nevadas, and it's going to melt really quickly, and our levee systems are really stretched. I anticipate massive flooding this spring.
Well, I think that on the first piece, yes, I think the Citizens Climate Lobby policy is a good one, and we do need that. We need a price on carbon for sure, and we've needed that for a long time, and it's something that works over time. So we're running out of time for good policies like that to work. We're running out of time in general, right? And in terms of a climate emergency, we're seeing a lot of local governments adopt climate emergency declarations. I do know that there has been a climate emergency declaration introduced, and I'm not sure what the status is. I would need to look at that. I think it was anyway, I'm not recalling which I think it was a senator introduction for a climate emergency declaration. So the idea is out there.
Who's the
And
top California climate champion legislator? Or is there a group that we can?
I mean, there are several. I think that and it depends on which piece of it. Like, we're working with Senator Henry Stern, and he's willing to stick his neck out and say, look, we got to push the goals ahead and work to meet those goals. So Senator Stern is one of the champions. Senator Lena Gonzalez, really on the tough business of trying to rein in the oil industry, is really a champion on some of these pieces of the puzzle that will actually reduce the use, extraction, and refining of fossil fuels. So that's Lena Gonzalez. She's really good. Monique Limon, similarly, they work together a lot. So I think Senator Becker, Josh Becker, is really great on sort of building decarbonization measures trying to reduce GHGs in that sector. So I think you do have a number of good champions there. Um, and so I can, you know, see if I can dig up that resolution, the climate emergency resolution that I think was introduced earlier this year. Like I said, over 200. There's so many, it's hard to keep track. But I can take a look at that. And I agree with you. We are in a climate emergency. We're in peril. There's flooding. There's extreme heat that we can expect in the summer. You know, these very, very windy episodes that seem windier to me than we ever had before. So I agree. Glenn, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do have a follow-up, just to go back to your feedback on the climate reporting measure, SB 253. Is it I don't know how to express. Does this supporting the concept of the bill, as you mentioned? You said you commented you guys support the concept of it. Is there any how does that work? Is there any risk in going ahead with the support of the concept, even though it's sort of the meat's not there?
If something gets amended into the bill that we don't like, we can change our position.
Back
So
out.
there's, once you've taken a position, it's not the end of the world. It's not like there's no going back. If something were to, it's like I said, we looked at it, we didn't see any red flags. We support it in concept. It's generally a bill that is trying to do something
Okay.
that we feel is a step in the right direction. So, and at that time, we see no big caveats. So that's why we switched the lever for support. If something were to come into it, say that we just felt was inappropriate, which is unlikely because we're familiar with the author and, you know, it's someone that we have worked with in the past. And we would think that he would reject any amendments that would really make it turn it into a bad bill. I mean, if that did happen, we could either remove our support or even take an opposed position.
Do you guys have any visibility to whether a bill like this is being pursued in other states?
I haven't looked at that myself. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I do know just in general that there's a sort of a general interest in more accountability and transparency among large corporations in general, oil industry in particular.
Okay.
I wonder if I could jump in.
Sure. Oh, Ken,
Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry,
Forgot about you.
I couldn't find the icon to raise my hand, so.
Okay, and we can't see you. Like if you
Yeah, I
just
know.
raised your hand like that, we can't see you.
Yeah,
So
right.
sorry about that.
Yeah, next time I'll come better prepared. But so anyway, on the subject of SB 233.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes so much sense. I'm glad to hear you're doing that. And I think Tesla is planning to support vehicle to grid by 2025. I think within about 2 years. And having some regulatory requirements or incentives to kind of keep their feet to the fire, I think, is a good thing. But there was a broader issue relating to EV that I wanted to raise. And right now, I think Tesla, for example, is on track to have a production rate of something like 10 million vehicles per year by 2030. But there's currently about 2 billion ICE vehicles on the road now, and it's under the best case, it would take decades to phase all those out and replace them with new EVs. So I was wondering, is anybody discussing or considering options or regulatory incentives to promote EV conversions? So for example, there's a French company, Transition One, maybe you've heard of them. They will convert several select models for a fee of about $6,000. It takes about 4 hours to do that. Ford and GM both sell EV crate motors, and I would think that with with effective regulatory incentives, the EV conversion market could maybe really take off if it's given a little bit of a push.
So, yeah, this is an idea that, I was very excited about years ago, and sort of started a conversation with some folks about it.
Yeah.
And uh, a lot of the folks being some of the people that I work with to this day at the North Bay Electric Auto Association, and some of them are the folks that have been doing this kind of thing for decades. And this kind of thing is converting, gas powered cars to EVs. And they convinced me, because I really thought, well, look, if you have a whole bunch of a certain kind of vehicle like Civics or Camrys or whatever, you get these vehicles that are popular where you've got a whole bunch, it's the same kind of vehicle. What about a kit that the people that can do that kind of thing can use to convert them in a program, a job creation program, yada, 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 all that. They convinced me that it's really probably never going to work. And I don't want to be just wet blanket, but they convinced me that it's probably never going to work for several reasons. And it boils really down to, what's the product you end up with? And is it something anybody's going to want? And it's a function of, if you, even if in the best case scenario, converting a car that was designed initially as a gas car, converting that to an electric vehicle is never going to be as good as an electric vehicle that was built as an electric vehicle from the beginning. And there are multiple parties that you need to have agreement on taking that gas car and converting it. And there are technical sort of difficulties and drawbacks that make it expensive, more expensive than you would want it to be. And so in terms of that kind of a program, I think it's probably unlikely that it would happen. There is a bill. I was just trying to scramble and find the bill number. It's in the tracker somewhere. Maybe I can just find it using a keyword or something. There is a bill that's looking to do some financial incentives to get some of the worst polluters, the gross emitters, they call them super users of gasoline, off the road. So there is that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that anyone's pushing for a program like that either. But
Yeah, well,
theoretically, it does make sense, doesn't it?
yeah, I think, California has its Clean Cars for All program you're probably familiar with, which will pay
Yes.
qualified, if you qualify, you can get up to what, $9,500 to scrap your old ICE vehicle and buy an EV.
Right.
But I agree. A EV conversion is not going to be as good as a new EV, but for $6,000, it's that you don't really need something that good. And for people who just need a car to get around town, they don't need self-driving and all these whiz bang
Sure. Yeah.
technologies.
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly for just I think that for certain cases, in little bits and pieces, it can work and it can make sense. I think that in terms of sort of a broad scale government program or anything like that, probably unlikely. And again, you've got to get
Okay.
cooperation from all kinds of multiple parties involved. So
Yeah.
I don't see that. I don't see a big push for that.
Okay. Thanks.
I don't think we've heard from Marty yet, and I see Marty's hand up. Why don't we go to Marty?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Bill Murphy put that Climate Action Now link in there. They make it pretty frictionless to contact a multitude of influencers or state senators, politicians, etc. Those in power, let's say, makes it frictionless to do it. The question is your group aligning with them? Because it seems like there would be a lot of synergy between your efforts and theirs. Just as a comment, and maybe look into it. Maybe you've already done it. I don't know, but it seems like it would be a good fit between the two parties because they're struggling over here, you're struggling over here. It seems to me, from my vantage point, which is pretty limited, I'll admit it, if those two came together, that synergy could be quite powerful. The other thing you mentioned so I'm going to have like 3 points here.
I'll just say to that one really quick, we do collaborate with a lot of organizations, including Climate Action now. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
And we are working, and we're trying to streamline some of these things. So that's sort of an effort that's in the works to figure out the best ways to collaborate and have each organization's strength sort of come to the fore.
Great. Yeah, good.
So thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the grid, this is old news, but I just want to kind of see how this regional grid improvement development or money or whatever differs. So my limited understanding is we kind of have 3 grids, basically 3 grids in the US, East, West, and Texas. And nationally, if we don't get our grids improved and kind of crossing the entire nation, it hinders the spreading or usage of renewable energy, as an example, wind energy in the Midwest, which is the highest producer, or solar transferred, instead of putting it in and throwing it away, which we do on occasion because we're overproducing solar. You don't need it. Guess where it goes? It goes into the ground. So if the question is, I guess, let me get to that. Is this grid regional an attempt to improve that, one step towards improving that, or you're pretty sure it's just an attempt to claw back the Enron freedom?
Thanks. Good question. And, it's not just that piece about the Enron clawback. It is also about how, which resources are shared and how. And I think in the case of California, joining with some of its Western neighbors that have more of an emphasis on coal in particular, like Wyoming and Utah and Arizona and a couple others, I think that the risk that we face is that some of these resources will end up being, I don't know if forced is the right word, but because the rules can be biased in such a way to favor them, that some of those resources will be what is used in California more than, say, California or any of those states wheeling renewable energy around. It would be about, finding a market for coal resources.
Sure, but I would
And
hope economics would drive that. And if the dollars per watt are really $1 a watt for renewable, let's say for solar, it's cheaper to install the renewable and therefore out-dollarize the coal. But I think you're saying doesn't matter. They're just going to say we need to sell our coal.
and that's, I think, probably part of the behind the scenes push is trying to ensure that those markets for both fossil gas and coal, still have a market. And so that's my concern. I think you will hear the argument, definitely, that this is a way to have renewables to be shared around a lot more. I think we can already do that in the Western Energy Imbalance Market, and we don't need to disband, essentially, CAISO as we've known it, where the governor appoints the members of it and the Senate confirms those appointments. And so we have sort of and it has an inbuilt mission that would be done away with to serve the public interest of the state of California. that would no longer be the case. And so we would really be at the mercy of this new entity that has all this coal and fossil gas interest. So that's my concern.
And then final comment, I would just corroborate what you said about EV kits. So I was in EV Silicon Valley Electric Automobile Vehicle Association. That thing's been around for over 50 years. And, 50 years ago, we were putting kits together and nothing comes close to what you can buy today. Forget Tesla with all the bells and whistles. You can't even get to the battery monitoring that they have currently with kits. So I just don't see, even for an A to B car getting around town, it's really tough, as you alluded to they call them rollers, where you strip they strip the ICE out and then put in the electric and the battery.
Yeah.
It's really tough to be economically competitive.
Yep. Thank you. Glenn?
Okay, yeah, just a comment. I think clock's ticking here, so maybe just a couple more minutes if other people have questions. Yeah, I have a couple follow-up questions. First on the bidirectional charging, as I kind of alluded to when you first mentioned this, my understanding, I was at a vehicle to grid webinar a month or two ago. CPUC person spoke, I think a PG&E person spoke, and several others. And I got the impression there that the real bottlenecks were sort of regulatory in terms of setting the standards. And so I mean, I think on the hardware side, the EV companies it's not a big barrier, but they're on the regulatory side, that's where things are being held up. So if the measure is, so I'm curious, is the measure, do you think,
biggest
trying
opposition
to get
from
into this, or
the
can they
biggest
try to work on that?
That's what it's all about. You're getting to the core of what it's all about. So it's sort of like, we need to have the vehicles do this, and not all the manufacturers of either the charging equipment or the vehicles are on board. And we are seeing them get on board. We saw Tesla recently make their announcement. Ford is totally on board. Nissan is totally on board, but there are several others that aren't. And so there is a little bit of that, but you're right that the big push is regulatory. And who's the biggest known opposition at this point? PG&E, the IOUs are opposed to. They don't want to see this, at all. And so this is one of the ways to force the changes we want to see in the regulatory environment. So we're highly cognizant of that, and that's what we're sort of working on also in some of the CPUC proceedings. I don't manage this bill. Our staff person, Kurt Johnson, is the sort of bill wrangler for SB 233, and he would be the person to sort of really provide. We will have a fact sheet and all kinds of information coming out soon that will provide more detail, I think, that for folks like you that would like to know more. So
Okay.
that's all coming. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. Sounds great.
Ken,
Okay,
you figured out how to raise your hand.
Ken,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I found the icon. So, so another concern I have is, all of this focuses on state governmental policy. My concern is, how can you integrate, individual, corporate, or local government actions, operating through climate action plans? How can you integrate those and coordinate those with state policy? I think I sent you a link to a paper I had written on this, but basically the state's cap and trade system really is not designed to accommodate local action. I was wondering if you have any thoughts or comments on that line.
I mean, so we do work, or we've evolved to most entirely be working on state policy. There's always, a hope that the policies that are implemented in the state that have some kind of role for local government or individuals, to play pursuant to that bill once it's enacted. And then there's, okay, what happens with that? You always hope that action takes place. I think a good example is community choice. I mean, the law was passed in 2002. It took quite a while for the first, local governments to take it up. But they finally did. And so we had the launch of the bill was passed in 2002. First local government to successfully launch was 2010 with MCE launching. So, you've got examples where it all kind of works according to plan, perhaps with a slow ticking clock. But I think that, I think that there are opportunities from both sides to engage local governments, paying attention to what's happening at the state. And I try to get my own little city of Sebastopol to take positions on certain bills that have relevance to a small city, and vice versa, to have the legislators, engage with their local towns. That's a good,
Yeah, but
form of government. So anyway, I don't know if that's answering your question, but.
yeah, I mean, if you take the issue, the program, the community choice programs, for example, if the intent of those programs is to influence statewide emissions, then, you're kind of running up against cap and trade, which is designed to ensure that they don't affect statewide emissions. So, unless you're somehow influencing the supply of emission allowances, which
I don't think that I'm not getting the connection there. I mean, community choice agencies can procure cleaner power than their incumbent IOUs. So that's just a function of their operations, and they can, get into that process of reducing emissions just by the choices they make
Well,
around.
they'll affect local emissions, but statewide emissions in capped sectors, which include electricity, are regulated by the supply of allowances. So if you're not affecting a supply of allowances, you're not influencing statewide emissions. So in other words, if you reduce your emissions, then whoever would have otherwise been.
Yeah, I think the presupposition that cap and trade is the only arena where emissions are reduced is incorrect. I mean, that's not the only place where emissions are reduced.
Right, but I mean, there, but 80% of the state's emissions are within the scope of cap and trade, and the way cap and trade works is that the supply of allowances determines statewide emissions in capped sectors. So unless you're influencing the supply of allowances, you're not influencing emissions in those regulated sectors that comprise 80% of the statewide emissions.
I would refer you to a fellow named Danny Cullenword. If you've ever heard of Danny Cullenword, I've
Yeah,
read a couple.
I know him very well. Yeah. And I've
Yeah,
had discussions
because
with him about
I'm
this.
actually not a cap and trade expert. Danny is.
Okay.
And so he'd probably be a better, if you know him really well, then that's who you should probably bring that kind of issue to. Because I don't know all the answers about cap and
Okay.
trade.
Well, but it's
Yeah.
important. I mean, I've had many discussions with the Independent Emissions Advisory Committee, which Dan serves on, as well as people involved with various climate action plans. And it's a big issue. I think Danny, to some degree, understands it. The director of the IEMAC understands it, I think, better than he does. But most people are basically unaware of this issue. But the fact is, unless you're influencing the supply of allowances, you're not going to be affecting statewide emissions in capped sectors. If cap and
I think
trade
the
is
key word is
operating,
in capped sectors. Yeah.
which
So
is
that's-
80%. That's electricity, it's transportation, it's industrial combustion. So it's really most of the state's emissions. Agriculture, those things are not covered, so that's a separate issue. But certainly electricity and transportation.
Um,
All right, well,
Okay.
I just
think-
would refer you to Danny, so go ahead, Glenn.
yeah, no, I can't, yeah, no, this is a great conversation, Ken, and maybe, yeah, we can take it offline only because it
Okay.
we probably would
'cause
need
I really
another
don't have
hour and need
further
to pull
answers
in
to
other
that,
people.
yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, I think what's interesting here is how your the other measure, your first measure, reducing the goal, the
SB 12,
SB 12 might, what needs to be going on in cap and trade, the area Ken's interested to sort of give it more teeth.
yeah, that issue has come up. That issue has come up. And could SB 12 serve as a vehicle for cap and trade reform? That question has come up. We're entertaining some amendments, and my understanding is we're entertaining amendments on it. Again, I'm not the bill wrangler for that one. It's our
Okay.
colleague Barry Vesser is sort of closer to that bill.
Okay.
And so there are some amendments, and it could have some influence on cap and trade. I would have to leave it there though, because I don't know
Yeah.
all the details.
Okay, let's just take two more questions and then I think we'll end the Q&A part. Adam, go ahead.
I'm sure. I just wanted to ask about SB 12. Of course, it makes everybody feel good to set a more ambitious target. I guess I'm curious what you think the practical impacts of doing so are actually going to be, especially if we're already struggling with our current targets.
Right. I mean, I think it's in the pathways documents that we put together, and Professor Dan Kamen at UC Berkeley has helped us a lot with that. And some other researchers and scientists have helped us with that. And we do have pathways documents to how to actually achieve it. And so that's, it's the underpinning documents, and that's all on the website. So I could share that with you, and that's what you need to look at. So it's not just set the goal and call it a day. It's set the goal and actually get on that trajectory. We're also working on calling it a managed transition that puts some harder numbers and some coherence to the very sort of disparate programs and policies that all sort of relate to climate that aren't really tied together right now. They're siloed, and having some coordination between the supply side and a managed decline of oil and gas use as we reduce our overall demand for those fuels. So we don't really have a hard and fast program like that in the state that you could point to and say, here it is. Kind of like the state budget. You have a fiscal budget, and you can point to the website where it is, and all the moving parts are there, and it has a bottom line to it. We need the same kind of thing, a sort of a California climate budget where it's all those moving parts are sort of tied together, and you've got milestones for meeting the targets, and you've got metrics applied to all the reductions, and demand shifts. So, Bill.
Okay, Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of, they're in the chat, but I'll keep them really fast. Early on, you mentioned that Fresno is the next CCA that you're working on bringing up.
That's what we're working on.
What are the successors for that one? Because I've always wondered, I know about the 19 or so that are already there, and I'm happy to hear about the Fresno. What are the ones after that and the one after that?
So we're getting down to the last few population centers in the state. I mean, so there's 25 now in the state serving 15 million customers.
Oh,
And Fresno, I believe, is the largest city that does not have a CCA. We were successful in getting Stockton to join East Bay Community Energy. That's underway. They're scheduled to launch in April 2024. In the Central Valley, those are the two cities we prioritize, Stockton and Fresno. We're actually going to be doing a presentation in Bakersfield in April. They actually invited us, and we have staff in Bakersfield, so we're going to be doing that. So Bakersfield, could happen. Some of the other smaller cities could still, you could see that happening. But in 2018, we had what I called the CCA baby boom. And that's when we had about 10 launches of community choice agencies all in 1 year. And I would say that was sort of the peak. That was the turning point. And you really got for the eligible areas, because you can't put community choice anywhere. It's got to be in an investor and utility service territory. It's got to be a city or a county. So, there are some, and it cannot be in a place where there's a muni, and it's complicated if there's an irrigation district or a rural co-op. So it's limited in terms of where it's eligible. And so I don't think there's a lot more to be said about sort of subsequent or further expansion of community choice. It's going to be interesting to see how it evolves and how the cities in the more sparsely populated counties in the state, like how they might somehow benefit from it, or eventually. We worked on that a few years ago and never came to really a conclusion on a path forward for the more sparsely populated counties and how they might sort of gain, get involved in CCA. So it's sort of an unanswered question.
Thank you. And then two really quick ones regarding bills that I think are good. They're nifty sounding bills, but they probably need to be stronger. And I was wondering if you've heard anything about attempts to make these stronger. Luce Rivas's climate education bill, and then Nancy Skinner's cement bill, with asking Caltrans to have 10% clean cement, but it's like a 10-year goal. It's a low number for a 10-year goal. Do you hear about either of those getting beefed up?
Well, we've made suggestions on 485. I think it's AB 485. Anyway, I think
285.
285. Yeah, 285. Sorry. The climate education bill. Really, just we've supported it. We've urged them to improve the language about it being climate science education. So we're looking at proposing some amendments there to ensure that it's latest climate science and not climate issues that aren't relevant to the crisis that we're facing. And on the cement bill, I have not reviewed that recently. I think I know which one you're talking about, but I don't know the details at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for coming. It's been a really interesting
Hey,
evening.
my pleasure. Great bunch of questions. Great conversation.
Woody, thank you very much. It was a great dialogue. I think we learned a lot, and maybe also some of the dialogue will continue through email or other channels.
Yes, and I'll get you, I think I had a note to get the letter for SB 12 support, and there might be one ready or almost ready for SB 233, so I'll try to get that to you too.
Okay, great. Thanks
so much, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Woody.
Okay, Woody.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Okay.
Thanks, Woody.
Okay. Let's see, we're down to 10 folks. I guess just a few. Everyone here, of course, has probably heard about the BACMD vote, so I don't need to explain that. I do want to thank Karen, put together, sort of compiled and edited the strategic plan, put a lot of effort into it, made a masterpiece, and we sent it off yesterday, I think. Anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge all the work Karen put into that and thank her. Adam, maybe you want to make a word on a upcoming speaker that I think we still haven't settled on the date yet exactly. But yeah.
Sure. So hopefully for our May meeting, I think that's where we're still targeting. I'm working on getting Rupak, I think his last name is Kandasamy, who is the local leader for the company Block Power here in the Bay Area, working in Oakland, Menlo Park, and just getting going in San Jose, hoping to get him to come and tell us a bit about what they're doing, kind of the mechanics of what they do, and how all of us could take advantage of what they do. Like, if you don't know, I'm sorry, they work in the area of home electrification, trying to make this much easier for people to deal with by managing so much of the process of finding contractors and that sort of thing. And the city of San Jose is signing up with them to electrify 250 homes over the next 3 years, I believe are the numbers. And so I'm hoping to get him to come and talk about not just like the overall arching sort of goals of block power, but much more about the mechanics of what do they really do and how is that useful to us and our friends, right? How do we get people to take advantage of this and how is it good for them? So hopefully that's coming in May.
Great. Okay.
Can I make a real quick follow-up on that, Adam?
Sure,
There's
sure.
a bill that is by Josh Becker, who's my state senator, and it's called 755 for the CLEAR website, Clean Energy Upgrades, is to put to use finally a modern website technology to have all of your questions and answers, all of your grant applications, all of your rebate applications, all of your permitting for all the state programs on a single website called CLEAR. And then it would also have hooks to federal and local rebate and subsidy programs and applications of a variety of types. And I wouldn't be surprised if it also has, like, for example, the utilities rebates, because some of them offer a rebate and things like that. So that's some perhaps the purview of that discussion.
That's a bill?
Yeah, it's a bill by Josh Becker. It's called 755, SB 755.
I see.
So,
Okay.
is the CLEAR website up and running, Bill, yet?
It's a proposal.
It's a proposal. Oh, that's part of the bill. Okay, got it. Okay.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's the idea is like, well, we're Silicon Valley. Why aren't we, using modern effortlessness kind of, if we can do it on an Amazon site in, is 3 clicks. Why isn't it?
Is the concept that this would be merged with some of be inclusive of the IRA funding?
I think it's got external links to the IRA funding, but if the IRA funding's flown through the state, yes.
Yeah,
It's a state
the state part, the state managed part. I see, but I mean, I assume the state has to be working without the bill. They already have to be working on the IRA, the websites to manage the IRA funding. No,
right. This is to try to have it be less crazy making for homeowners. It's all about home efficiency, home building decarbonization, and home things like rooftop solar.
There have been multiple efforts on this by different groups, usually for their geographic area, right? Like, if the state can actually do something good, like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sound like a dream come true.
Right, no kidding. Right, so need that.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No. Okay. Any other announcements, chapter related announcements or comments anyone would like to make? Deb, any comments about the newsletter? You want to remind us of our deadline?
Oh, yeah, I sent out an email today that went out. So the deadline is the 5th. And there's a link there to put your stuff in the drive. Also, there's just so many good things that came out of this meeting. I was taking snips and everything. So I'm planning to put a lot of this great stuff into the newsletter as well.
That would be awesome.
Today.
That would be great. Okay. Karen, any last comments?
No, other than this was a tremendously great meeting. Thank you for bringing Woody here to share with us. And, my goal is that we've got the recording and hopefully we can encourage other people to watch and learn.
Yes. Can I assume the recording will be available? You'll have it after the meeting, right? Or tomorrow.
Right, exactly.
Great,
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay,
And
especially since I got knocked off the grid there for a little bit.
And we'll put it, we always now, just Glenn, so we put a little summary. Deb is great about putting a little summary about the previous meeting below
Yes.
the upcoming meeting.
I've seen it.
So we'll have that recording link
Great.
in there as well.
I've seen it and I've actually used it. So thanks
Awesome.
to Deb and to you, Karen, too. Yeah.
So then the third thing is, and it works.
It works. Yes, it works great. I reviewed last night our last month's meeting.
Cool.
And do these end up on the Climate Reality Silicon Valley website somewhere?
They should, and that's something that
Yes.
I would like to work with our web guy on, is putting more resources in, and certainly these meetings. So yes, that's something that should probably, amongst everything else, happen in the next month.
Okay, that's great.
Sorry. So the video link, Deborah, the video link for like the last month's meeting was on the shared drive.
It's on the shared
Oh,
drive,
oh,
but
oh,
it's
okay,
not on
I
the
see.
website.
Got
Yeah,
it,
for
got
like the
it,
public.
got
to
it. Excellent, excellent. Okay.
Yeah, and what'd be really great is I'm sort of like, because I lost my social media person and my Twitter person. And
Oh.
so I'm sort of on my own here. But what I'd like to do is then start putting something on Instagram and Facebook after the meetings, and with the link, and then having it, getting more people to the website and stuff. So those are all strategies to execute. And one of my big strategies is to get on the phone and try to get some more volunteers. So,
Yeah, that maybe we can also try to help there.
okay.
That would be good. You don't need someone in your vicinity, do you? Or you?
No, not at all. In
Okay.
fact, our web person's in Philadelphia, or outside Philadelphia.
Oh, really?
As in Harrisburg. So now in this brave new world where we can be very remote and
Yes.
still get it done. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sounds great. Okay, everybody. I think we'll call it a wrap.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.